Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Big Blend Radio's monthly Military Monday show. We air this show every first Monday of the month. Today is May 3rd, 2021, and we're airing live from historic Madison, Wisconsin. It is historic. A lot is going on in this beautiful city, and it is great to be back. The last time we were here was pretty much all of December and early January when there was a lot of snow, and today there's dandelions and flowers everywhere and a lot of green. Nancy, it's good to be back, right? Everyone, we're your hosts, Nancy Reed and Lisa Smith, the mother-daughter travel team. We travel full-time on our Love Your Parks tour, where we document parks and public lands and share the stories of the communities in our publications. We have Big Blend Radio and TV magazine and also Parks and Travel magazine. Check it all out at bigblendmagazines.com. Today's show, we welcome back U.S. Army veteran and acclaimed author and military historian Mike Guardia. He's joining us as guest co-host once again because if we do anything military, we want him by our side, seriously. And because it doesn't matter. You can ask him anything. He knows to this day. One day we'll have to play 100 questions with him because he really does know so much. He's joining us to talk about his brand new book. It's called Days of Fury, Ghost Troop and the Battle of 73 Easting. And welcome back, Mike. How are you?
Lisa and Nancy, thank you so much. It is awesome to be back on the show. I'm doing great. How are you two?
We're doing good. We're doing awesome. It's green and beautiful. What's it like in Minnesota today?
Pretty much the same. I'm finally glad the cold weather's behind us now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now we know, you did shows with us while we were in Tucson, Arizona, Yuma, Arizona, and sunshine, and, you'd call up and say, it's 20 degrees or something, and we're like, dude, that's really cold, but we really couldn't feel it until we got here.
And now we know.
Now we know what you're talking about. I'm excited to talk about Days of Fury. I think your books really get into battle strategies, but also really, I think, through the years of talking to you on Big Blend Radio, you really seem to give a perspective of soldiers and what they're going through in the field and how they've had to make decisions and how to plan a battle or do something like this isn't going as planned, so we're going to make a change. Throughout, wouldn't you say that's really what you do, Mike? Because you're sharing the story of what went down, true stories. We can dig into it. So I think that you also have an audience. If we get it, I know a lot of other people that don't know much about military history are getting it because you do involve that human side. So do you feel that with what you've written over the years?
Well, that's really what I try to accomplish. Every story that I write, I always try to include the human element in there, and I always try to give a perspective of what's happening from a soldier's eye view. Yeah, I feel that the more I can incorporate the human elements into these stories, the more that they'll resonate with a lot of the broader readership out there, because it's really soldiers themselves who drive these stories, and it's really them, the people who participated in these conflicts on the front lines, that really have the most intimate tales that need to be shared. And I think it's from them that you can learn probably the most important lessons.
It seems also that a lot of the people you're writing about, the soldiers you're writing about, men, women are included in that. They're often from an underdog perspective too. That you wouldn't think that they would kick ass, and they do at the beginning. You know what I mean?
Right.
In life.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That has actually been a recurring theme in a lot of the stories that I've written. I get a lot of tales from these veterans, and when I just follow the story arc of their life, one of the things that they all tend to have in common is they all come from a pretty humble background, and there's really nothing inside of their direct lineage that would indicate that they would become some of the monumental heroes and do the heroic things that they went on to do. And it really just goes to show that there's a little bit of heroism inside of everyone, and it really doesn't take anything special to be able to dig down deep and rise to the occasion.
I think that it helps that the stories are out there. I think it helps for the veterans. What do you think? I mean, you're a veteran. You've interviewed Ghost Troop. I mean, you interviewed as many people as you could in that. And I know that's not easy to do that. And I'm going to talk about that process as well. But to have their stories told, especially those who have been in combat, do you think it helps the veterans?
Absolutely, it does. I think for a lot of them, the process is therapeutic. I think it helps them achieve a lot of closure. They come back from these conflicts. There's a lot of emotional trauma that they carry with them. And just to know that they have an advocate out there who is also a fellow veteran, I think that helps them want to share more. I think that makes them more receptive to trying to get their stories down on paper, and also to serve, I guess, as a clarion call to any number of decision makers out there that if ever again you feel the need to send somebody in harm's way, just know that this is going to be the downstream effect of what happens.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's interesting with the Days of Fury, and also going back, I know you were on the show. The last one we talked about Hal Moore, and also the museum, his museum in Bardstown, Kentucky. Everyone, it's the story's featured in Parks and Travel magazine. Go to nationalparktraveling.com. We visited the museum, and Mike is well known for writing about Hal Moore and writing with him. Hal Moore, A Soldier Once and Always, chronicling his life. And we just watched the movie We Were Soldiers, starring Mel Gibson. I know we're late, Mike, but we got there. Finally, it came to Hulu. You know we travel. It's like, but we finally got to really sit and watch it. And I actually think I have watched it before, but I just didn't put it all together. And we couldn't believe it. We're like, finally, we can watch this. And it really brought home, we've talked about Hal Moore, and you've got, more than one book on him. You also have the leadership values, and just what you're doing and how he was in Days of Fury. All kinds of goes together in a way of looking at the situation. It's not like the military says, here's your perfect scenario. That's kind of what I got out of it. And Nancy's been reading Days of Fury and running out and telling me everything every 5 seconds. And I know, and I've been reading it too, but she's well into it. And she's like, I didn't know this, I didn't know that. And so it's really something that's important. And everyone, MikeGuardia.com, by the way, and all his books, and there's many, are on Amazon, so go get them. But there's something where here what Nancy was talking about, the leadership trust, and how much harder is it when you really aren't served the perfect platter to continue the job. I'm not going against the military, you know what I mean? Am I going to get in trouble?
No.
You know what I mean? A battle is never a perfect scenario whatsoever, right?
It's a long-standing idiom in the military that no plan survives first contact.
So let's back up a little bit. Days of Fury.
Sure.
This comes off of another book, right? So this was you didn't want to let this story go. No.
So actually, the idea for Days of Fury grew out of another book that I did called The Fires of Babylon, which was examining the Battle of 73 Easting from the perspective of Eagle Troop. Probably a wider swath of the book-buying public is more familiar with Eagle Troop because that was the unit that was commanded by what was then a young Captain H.R. McMaster, long before he became the National Security Advisor in the Trump administration. So I actually had the chance to interview H.R. at length when he was still on active duty. Actually, we were both on active duty. At the time, I was a captain. He was a 2-star general, and I had the chance to interview him at length, and he put me in touch with a lot of the other Eagle Troop veterans that he was still in contact with. And ironically enough, what really was a boon for me in finding a lot of the other Eagle Troopers out there was Facebook, because a lot of them were connecting with each other, and they were also members of these Facebook forums. And it was in the course of me researching that story and in the course of me writing it where I really discovered that, Eagle Troop did a tremendous job at the Battle of 73 Easting, but their actions tied in very closely with Ghost Troop, which was fighting on their left flank. And as I was putting all the pieces together, I finally told myself, I really can't tell the full story of 73 Easting unless I tell it from Ghost Troop's perspective as well. And it was in the summer of 2015, after Fires of Babylon came out, that I decided to take up the task to try and gather as many Ghost Troopers as I could and see if they would share their stories with me, because I really wanted to get a full picture of the battle, just kind of highlight a lot of the operational differences between Eagle Troop and Ghost Troop, and how even though they operated somewhat differently from each other, they all fit into the bigger picture of America's victory at 73 Easting. Just an incredible experience for me to interview all of these guys, incredible people, who have done some amazing things in their lives, even to be able to share some of the more unpleasant aspects of their deployment was just an incredible honor to get that down on paper. And yeah, so my goal really was to paint that operational picture as intently and intimately as I could.
Wow. And like you were saying earlier too, you being a veteran, talking to other veterans, it's almost like a family, right? I know as a musician, and Nancy, both of us musicians and being in bands, and a musician comes on a show. If they don't know I'm a musician and we have another musician co-host, I'll talk to the other musician more. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm like, hey, dudes, it's me too. You know, I know about that family. You know, and there is we have family, like these family groups, things where, you know, musicians, we go out on the front line of whatever happens when you go on stage. Even doing live radio shows like today, you never know what's going to happen. You're putting yourself out there 100%. And you're all taking that together, and there's a vibe. I can't compare it to the military. Obviously, when you guys go out there on the front lines, absolutely can't. All I can say is, in our way, they say public speaking is one of the scariest things to do, and I know, like I have a hard time. I'm one of them, believe it or not. I can sing, and I can really sing, but I cannot get up on stage and say hi, everybody. Believe it or not. So there it is. Now it's a little different, but that same feeling of camaraderie, and you need that, and I think that's what makes good leadership too. Like, I'm going back to Helmore again. I'm sorry, but like he was like, I'm on the ground with you before and after, like the whole thing. You know, I'm with you. I'm not just going to sit there and direct. I'm in it, and I think that's something that when you're in battle, you're in it. And you don't want someone just sitting on the sidelines and dictating what to do, right? Does that even occur?
It's occurred a lot, and it occurs both in and out of the military. There's a whole swath of leaders out there who prefer to lead from the rear, who make uninformed decisions from ivory towers, and they presume that they know better than those who are on the ground and who are closest to the action. Whether it's a business or whether it's in the military. Yeah, I mean they're out there. They're out there.
Oh yeah, we know.
Well, but that's for sure. There's to me, it's like two sides of the fence. What's morally right, or what's your bottom dollar? And there's some who choose morally right, and others who choose what's the best for my bottom dollar. And therein lies the decision-making process for a lot of people.
It's hard, and I think when you're in a situation of battle, that's got to be so difficult. It just because you want to save your butt. You know, it's scary. All I know is Nancy and I can only go through what we've been through in life, where it's been life or death situations, and that's all I can go on. And we've had a lot of those situations in our life. Not military, but guns in our head or whatever. So I think that's kind of close enough. And you have to trust who you're with at that time, or know not to trust them, and make your own plan. And if you have a bad leader, do you thwart them? You know what I mean? So that's what I love about your writing and what you're doing, is you're sharing all those different lineages. I do want to go to you've got Ghost Troop, the Battle of 73 Easting. Every time I hear the Battle of 73 Easting, it sounds so British to me. You know, when I hear, really? I don't know what it is. Okay. I always just think we're like, are we going to England with this? What's going on?
Well, yeah, it's a pretty unusual name for a battle. You had the flat and featureless deserts of Iraq, where there was no identifiable landmarks for miles on end. And, when you're just in the middle of a flat desert and you're engaging the enemy essentially out in the middle of nowhere, you really don't have anything to identify the battle by except for where it happens on a map. And an easting actually refers to the longitudinal grid lines that you find on a military map. And so they say, okay, well, if we have this particular section of a map and all of these grid lines are going in successive order, well, if we're making contact at this particular point on the map, then we're just going to call it, okay, the battle, here's an easting, and the number that matches to it, 71, 72, okay, 73 easting it is.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow, so just call it. That's it. Okay. So let's go to this. This was all part of Operation Desert Storm, and which is, the Greater Gulf War, right? And before we went on air, I was talking about like knowing where this was happening in high school, and I'm going back on the dates. And Absolutely. When I was in high school, that's when it was going down. And, we would always say, like, if something was bad, and there was bad stuff going on in South Africa at the time, we were there, right, Nancy? That's kind of where I was going with, we've had all these things happen. And we did. We had riots. We ended up in riots, not willingly, just swept up in them, and it's scary when it's mob craziness. We could go on and on. But at that point, like all of us, kids, teenagers, we were sitting there going, well, not as bad as being in a concentration camp in Kuwait. That was our thing. That was this, I don't know, it was like this running saying that was going on, and that you would, be able to get outside and go play or not play or whatever, do whatever shenanigans we wanted to get up to at that age. But it was the running thing, and it was kind of scary, just thinking about what was going on. And that was a new era, because I think, World War I, World War II, Vietnam was always big. The Korean War, many of us don't think of it. That gets kind of left under the blanket, though it's very prominent. And then, Nancy, you were carrying on about this today, too. I mean, this was a different generation of soldiers. It was a new era. It might kind of your era, my era, I'm a little older, but kind of this new generation of soldier, and then different rules, right, in a way.
Right. Yeah. It really took a lot of us by surprise, I think, because just the whole nature of the conflict kind of seemed a little bit anachronistic. It was, here we were at the end of the Cold War, and we thought, okay, well, now that the Soviet menace has gone into the dustbin of history, we really don't have a big peer-to-peer threat. And, most of what we're going to be doing from here going forward is probably just going to be training for an eventual conflict, but we don't know who we're really training to fight against. Maybe it might be the North Koreans, maybe it might be Iran, but we at least thought for the foreseeable future, well, gosh, maybe aside from a token peacekeeping mission here or there, there's not going to be a whole lot for us to do. But then all of a sudden you had Saddam Hussein, who was in command of the fourth largest army in the world, suddenly invade Kuwait. And we were thinking to ourselves, okay, well, this guy has the fourth largest army in the world. It's the largest in the Middle East. He has a very tank-heavy force that, is filled to capacity with the latest and greatest of Soviet armor. The same type of mechanical threats that we were preparing to square off against for years during the Cold War. It looks like we're going to have one more big conventional war after all. And it was something that we did not anticipate it going quite as well as it did, simply because Saddam had strength in numbers. And there were several strategic analysts and talking heads on the media who were anticipating as many as 20,000 casualties on the first day of the ground war alone.
Wow.
We were expecting quite an intense fight between ourselves and the Iraqi Republican Guard.
No, I was just going to say it's really interesting, because where does the information really come from, and how much of it can you trust? There's so much in the media, and then there's almost, the media is almost divided. I'm talking about major newspapers, they're almost divided. And so it's like, if you listen, I don't want to say particular stations, but if you listen to that station, it's all going this way, and if you listen to other stations, it's going a different way. And so how do you trust the news media? As viewers, you might like a certain presenter or find them funny or sarcastic, or you will like to watch it because it's interesting, it's entertainment, not news.
Right.
In some regards, I feel like we've gone from news to entertainment instead of news. You know what I mean? I think it confuses the issues.
That's really the real trick, isn't it? Because, that's something that I've even noticed in my lifetime. Still young enough to remember a lot of the nightly news broadcasts that were happening during the Gulf War. And when I compare that to the quality of the news programs that I see today, I really do see a night and day difference. So, I think it's a chore for everybody out there. You don't quite know what news outlet to trust, because everyone is saying a slightly different version of the story than everybody else is. Does the truth lie somewhere in the middle? And, how many different sources do you have to go to before you can really trust reliable information. And, sometimes even the official record gets it wrong. I mean, there was a particular instance in the Ghost Troop book that I really felt compelled to correct. There was a certain report of an incident that happened towards the tail end of a battle that had been put into the official government report. And for years, this particular verse was reported like it was the gospel according to St. Luke. And, I find out almost 30 years later that, when I talked to the men in the vehicle who were actually there and saw it happen in real time, they say, well, no, the official version's actually wrong because we were all there, we all saw it, and it all happened according to X, Y, and Z, not A, B, and C. And it's sad because nobody bothered to interview us when they were making the official records.
Wow. Oh, but nothing's perfect, right? Because at the end of the day, everything is human. Wars are human.
Yeah.
And people fighting them are human, and that's the beauty of what you're doing is that you're reminding us of what war is. And you always hear on the news, so many troops, this, that. It's like this bulletin board without the humanity, and then sometimes it's humanity if it's Memorial Day or Veterans Day. No offense to those days, it's important, but sometimes I know, like us, with what we do on our shows, we're conversations. We're not news media, just, we're conversations here and learning ourselves. We learn from you and we appreciate it. And I know our listeners do too. And, do you have all these holidays and celebrations and, it's this day, it's that day. Today is the day that Flanders Field was written. So that's important. That was in 1915, So to me, that kind of thing is important to note. But some of these holidays, I sometimes wonder, I think they're created so that we don't just hear the news stats, that we do put some humanity and thought into it. But then sometimes I think, why can't we do it every day? Maybe we can't as a human body or brain capacity, not just recognize or feel this. I don't know. But what you're doing with your books, I think is so important because it's someone who has studied this and interviewed people and gone through the labor of putting it together and writing it so that it's something that is comprehensive, but something that everyone can read, no matter whether you're someone like, me or Nancy that has not been in battle, and we don't know all the things, all the abbreviations and all of that stuff. But you can get the gist of the story to have an understanding. And then you have those who've served in the military are going to go, I know what you're talking about, and someone's telling my story. And then there's the people you've really told their story about, which I think is important. I mean, you're telling a story of my era. And, Operation Desert Storm, the Gulf War, I mean, I feel like we're still battling it, aren't we, Mike? In a way, aren't we? Afghanistan, it's like we pull out of this, everybody says no, if there's a big war on that, So in a way, it just is this never-ending war that's going on. And what about the men and women that are part of this? In your book, you talk about Armored Cavalry Regiment, the U.S. Army 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. Tell us about that so we can get an idea because, the other thing is, it's like here's these regiments, everybody's going out there, but now it's desert. If you think about Vietnam was in the swamps, and now we're in the desert. Hello. Right. That's suddenly having to be ready for that.
Right. So the Armored Cavalry Regiment was an organization that was unique to the U.S. Army, and there were 3 heavy Armored Cavalry Regiments, or ACRs for short. There was the 2nd ACR, there was the 3rd ACR, and then there was the 11th ACR. And these were comparable in size to a modern-day tank brigade. But they were independent and they were very rapidly deployable. And their sole purpose was to provide a heavy armored reconnaissance and aerial reconnaissance asset to heavy forces that were deployed in the field. The ACR would be the mobile heavy armored force that was out in front, that would be acting as the eyes and ears either for the division commander or for the corps commander. It's basically a built-in early warning system for all of the conventional follow-on forces so that those higher echelon commanders could make decisions based upon the enemy contact reports that the ACR was making.
Oh, so this is a huge deal. Now can I ask you my girly question of the night?
Sure.
No one always do this.
Go,
Okay,
girly.
so you've got Eagle Troop and you've got Ghost Troop. I always want to know about both of us do, Nancy. You're part of this. Naming of aircraft, naming of tanks. So naming of troops, who does that?
Okay. So typically that is done at the squadron level, or the individual troops can get together and they can vote on a name that they want, and then the squadron commander can bless off on it. So in a typical armored cavalry squadron, you will have some very colorful names for a lot of the troop elements there. And, troops are going to be the equivalent of the companies in all of the conventional units. So instead of having Alpha Troop or Bravo Troop or Charlie Troop, either the squadron commander or the individual troop commanders can be as creative as they want to be. They can say, hey, I want to call this troop, I want to call it Apache Troop, or I want to call it Avalanche Troop, or some might even get more creative and say I want to call it Anarchy Troop or whatever. Yeah, so it really just depends on one, the creativity, and if the incoming commanders want to continue on the tradition of keeping the particular troop name. But it really could change on the dime. You could have a unit called Bandit Troop, and they could have the Bandit Troop name for 25 years. But then a new troop commander comes in and says, okay, well, I think we've been Bandit Troop long enough. Do you guys have any ideas for a new troop name, or do you want to keep the old Bandit Troop name? And if they vote on a new name, then that is unofficially what it becomes. My old company down at Fort Bliss, I actually did the same thing. I was in a tank company. It was Charlie Company, and the brigade that I was in wanted to be creative with naming its companies. So at first we were Chaos Company.
Oh.
But then probably 2 years or so after I left the company, I started talking to a lot of the alumni back there, and they said, okay, well, it used to be Chaos Company. Now we're called Cobra Company.
Oh.
So, don't mess with that.
Does that make you feel
things can
bad?
change.
Does that make you feel bad, or do you feel like, oh, they changed the name, or does it not?
It didn't really make me feel bad. I just thought that, gosh, I didn't know that it would be that easy to change it. I figured that if I just figured that if the inaugural name of the company was Chaos Company, then that's what it was going to be forever and ever. But, I figured that any change to the name would be, like coming down through an official order and a memorandum for record and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Well, listen, bands do it. I'm going back to the music thing. Bands changed the Jefferson Airplane to Jefferson Starship. They went from an airplane to beaming up.
It's hardly the same thing.
Van Halen was going to change their name, and then that didn't happen. But because some of those names are really bad. But it does happen, But okay, so last question. I know because we're already going to start running out of time. But Mike, for you writing both of the books on both troops with the battle, here we are. I'm sorry, but when you think about it, British. 73 East thing is British. But when you think about
British.
Yeah, Days of Fury. When you think about it, does that connect closer for you personally because of the era that you served in the military?
I think it connects personally to me in the sense that these are soldiers that had the same occupational specialty that I did. We're talking with soldiers who served in tank units. We're talking about the concepts of armored warfare. I think that's where the personal connection begins, and I think at the same time, the personal connection for me was really just, being where I am in the timeline. I'm one of the elder group of millennials, and we were in grade school when the Gulf War was kicking off, and it was the first major conflict that really occurred during our lifetimes. I mean, we were too young to remember Vietnam. A lot of us weren't born then, but this was our first introduction to, this is what's happening on the world stage, and this is what a war looks like. So kids take this in, because when you're grown-ups, you're probably going to be seeing a lot more of this.
It is like that, growing up in Africa most of my life, in England, everybody was still stuck on World War II. and told Nancy and I that we were late for the war, and I had no idea what they were talking about.
I know. We were like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I wasn't there.
Everywhere we went, they said, oh, the Americans were late we were late coming
I was like, my mom always told me to be punctual.
Well, we saved them from speaking German, so,
exactly.
I mean, there's that.
We might have been late, but we kicked butt.
but yeah, I mean, it was just different. But in Africa, there were always wars. There was the Anglo-Boer War, not Anglo-Boer War, but that was way beyond. But Angola was going on at the time when I was in high school and stuff. And so it was scary because a lot of my friends ended up in military, especially out of high school. Men, young men, you either served 2 years of mandatory military or you had to go to college. And if you went to college, you're doing your military service after that. No matter what you do, you're going to military service. Kind of like Israel does that with men and women. And, I watched what happened to a lot of my friends who didn't know what they were getting themselves into and didn't know. And it was, you just didn't know.
You possibly
and they weren't,
know?
And you weren't well equipped a lot of times. And I'm still going to get emails after this. And at the same time, though, it wasn't like everybody's got a different personality or who they are. It was like you're shoved in. That's it. And if a war was going on at that time or smaller battles, we're talking Africa, everything was going on. And it could be a riot that suddenly you're in and you're not a person who can deal with that kind of thing. I personally had people real close to me try to commit suicide when I was in high school. They were graduates. And I didn't understand I didn't understand what was going on. And I wish I knew better. And I wish there was more awareness. And I know we're going to talk about that later on the show, but I wish I understood, and I didn't. But there was a lot of that. Just within your friends graduating and having to go, not knowing. And, I look at Vietnam War, and I look at, even young men and women that do sign up, maybe I don't know what happens from there on. Do they get put in the right position that they belong in or not? And I just go from my friends in South Africa, and some of them didn't come out very good. They didn't come out healthier.
But you have to, you have to remember you're in a different continent with different economic problems.
But it was really scary as a person in high school watching what was going on. And we were, making these jokes about Kuwait, but you make those jokes when you're scared, and you just wondered if the friends you're graduating with, what's going to happen with them, because they're going to be forced in. Seriously,
it was really hard to look at the group of Lisa's friends and hear that they're now entering the military, and I could look as a parent, looking at the lack of knowledge of what was about to happen to them. They suddenly have a reality-based opinion of how it was presented and how there was a certain amount of pride on the parents' part that their children were doing good by doing their duty as a citizen, but there was also a blind eye to what was really about to happen. And it was really kind of sad because I knew her friends pretty well. They spent a lot of time at our house. I'm like, you're so not ready to do anything close to any kind of combat or military service. They're kids, and really kids. And I'm not putting them down at all, but emotionally and mentally ready for what was about to happen, it wasn't there. And I don't think the training, so I'm going to get in trouble for that one, but the training wasn't there either.
No, it was too. You're in it. And
the training wasn't there.
It's interesting in South Africa because at the end of the day, too, the Army is who taught me how to play soccer, and I was pretty good at it. On the fun side of it. But yeah, Mike, this country, do you ever see that? The draft for Vietnam was kind of like that, right? In a way.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the draft and the personnel policies that were in place during Vietnam are very counterproductive and also incredibly inefficient. But one thing that I can say with every degree of certainty is that we learned a good lesson from it. We learned what mistakes that we did not want to repeat. And one thing that I can also say with complete certainty is that the U.S. military is both the best trained and the best equipped fighting force anywhere in the world.
Okay, so listen, we've got Jim Pigeon joining us next. And we're going to swap some music around here because of time, because we went over time, because we do well on that. But I actually want this to happen this way, too. Everyone, again, before we bring Jim on, please go to MikeGuardia.com. And the book, again, is Days of Fury, Ghost Troop and the Battle of 73 Easton. You can get it on Amazon like his other books, too.